Hi friends, we are going to go ahead and get started. Today we are making our Let It Snow sign. So you should have most everything that you need in your kit that's provided. All you will need to add is a hammer or a nail gun and some scissors. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So the first thing you have to do is just sand all of your wood. Okay, so we sand right along the corners all the way down all of these pieces. I always say that our goal on sanding is to sand enough so that you're not going to get a splinter if you touch your wood, okay? So you're going to do that on all 6 of your pieces. Feel free, if I get ahead of you, just pause me and finish your step and then catch up to me, okay? So sand all of your pieces, and then we're going to go ahead and start assembling our sign, okay? Because of the way we're painting this sign, it doesn't really matter which side of the wood is up and which is down. So if you have a side that maybe looks bad or has a nick in it or something, put that facing up. That way it'll be on the back of your sign. But if not, then whatever is facing towards the table, that's going to be the front of your sign. I want to leave about nickel spacing between each of my boards. So I'm just going to lay these out the way that I want them, and I'm leaving a little bit of spacing in between, okay? And then I'm going to put these little braces on the back of the sign. It doesn't really matter necessarily the spacing of where they are. I would say probably 2 inches from the edge, and try to make it as straight as possible. Because we have that gap in between the boards, you'll be able to see a little bit of this wood through it potentially, so you want it to not look all wonky and crooked. So we're going to leave that as straight as we can. So I'm going to show you how to do it with the hammer, and then I'm going to finish it with the nail gun just for the sake of speed. Okay, so on this project, you're going to do 2 nails on each little slat. So it actually ends up being 16 nails that you're going to hammer. So we're just going to put this on here and just hold it nice and still, holding my board still and putting some pressure on those slats. And then hammer that all the way down. Make some noise in here, okay? And then you're going to do another one on that same board. All the way down. So as you're hammering, it might shift your boards a little bit. So before you go to the next one, just always keep adjusting and making sure that they all stay nice and straight on here like you like it, okay? So you're going to do that basically 16 times. So 2, 4, 6, 8, and then 10, 12, 14, 16 on this side, okay? Like I said, let me just finish this up with my nail gun. If you use a nail gun, you need to use 1 1/4 inch nails. My favorite tool. I love it. I have 3 of those. So usually if we're doing our in-person parties, y'all can borrow that, but unfortunately we're not doing that right now, so hopefully we'll be back to that soon. All right, so now I've got my 4 boards all together. Okay, so you can see I have little gaps in between. So awesome. So now I'm ready for my gray paint and my paintbrush. So just pop open that paintbrush. We are going to dry brush on the front of this. So if you have not done dry brushing before, let me just show you real quick. So dry brush is really just dipping it and then wiping that paint off a little bit so that we get more like a streaky look. I like to start with my edges, so I'm not going for a totally solid look, but just enough to kind of give it that little distressed kind of pattern on there. But I like to work my way around the sides, that way I can just focus on what the front looks like, okay? So as I finish each side, I'll kind of show you what that looks like. So you can see there, not perfect, just enough to give me a little paint coverage on there. And then I'm just going to continue to work my way around. So dip just a little bit, wipe it off, and then pull around the sides. Okay, so this is a pretty thin layer of paint on here. Okay. And this is just preference as well. So if you really want it to be a solid gray and you don't want to have the distressed look like in the example, then you're more than welcome to paint this until you like the way that it looks. I am going to do long, light strokes on the front of my boards. And I'm just going to do one at a time. And this is what I call, like I said, what I call dry brushing, which just means I'm not wanting this paintbrush to be totally sopping wet. I'm dipping and then I'm wiping off. And then I'm staying in that up and down pattern with these boards so that it kind of gives the illusion of like that wood grain, okay? So I just want to get a little bit of coverage, but also leave a little bit of the wood color, that kind of whitish color showing through, okay? So I'm just going to work my way down. So each board might look a little bit different, and that's totally fine. That just adds more to the impression that it's just old weathered wood. So you can see so far what that one looks like. Let me hop on over to another board. All right. So we'll just keep on going. It takes a little bit of muscle work. I guess a little elbow grease is a way to put it. It's not hard. It just takes a little bit of patience to kind of get it the way that you want it, okay? Because you have to dip it a couple times per board. If any of your little paint bristles come off, that's fine. You can either let it dry and then pop them off, or you can pull them off like while you're working. No big deal. Okay? So there we go, halfway done. Get this center ones done. I kind of like it when they don't all look exactly the same. So I'm hoping that even though I'm kind of doing the same technique, I can get a little bit of differentiation between these boards. I think it just makes it look a little bit more natural, and yeah, I just like that. So don't worry if they do not look perfect, okay? You just want to remember that we're painting the words "Let It Snow" in white, so we want to make sure we have enough coverage to get a little bit of contrast, okay? So if it was too light, it would be harder to see, but I think as long as you're getting, as long as that paintbrush is touching everywhere on this wood, even if it's just a very light texture, you should be fine in terms of the contrast, okay? And of course, if you want to distress it a little bit more at the end, you can always sand it a tiny bit. All right, so I think I'm done. Let me show you what that looks like. So I'm just kind of trying to make sure all my areas are covered and even and stretched out as much as possible, because I want this thing to dry pretty good too. So I'm kind of just wiping it off, getting all those little bubbles and little pieces of paintbrush, if they fell apart, then I'm wiping those off. All right, so let me show you that. So that's what my board looks like. Ta-da! Okay, so not solid, definitely like a little distressed look on that. Okay, so I'm done with my paintbrush, so I'm gonna go ahead and set that aside. I'm also done with my gray paint, so I'm gonna set that aside, because if I don't, I will definitely spill it. So I'm gonna set that aside for now, okay? Now this needs to dry for just a minute, so I'm gonna set that here, and we can work on our snowflake, okay? Because, well, two things. First, we have our stencil, and then we also have our snowflake we can work on. So let's do those things real quick while we wait. So if you notice on the top of your stencil, so you should have "Let It Snow," and then on the very top you have this random little circle up here, okay? So I'm gonna kind of peel back this clear just a little bit. I'm gonna peel back that clear, and I'm gonna get that black circle, okay? So I'm just gonna use my fingernails, I'm gonna grab that tiny little circle. This tiny little circle is actually to go right on top of the little hole that's in your snowflake, okay? So I just put that right there on the top of that hole. That's just gonna make that surface flat, so when we go to paint the snowflake, you're not gonna see that it had a hole in it, okay? And so that's in there because this was like an ornament for a tree, but we covered that, and that'll make it look like a solid piece of wood whenever we paint it, okay? So next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my scraper, and I'm gonna go ahead and peel up my stencil. I'm not gonna actually stick it yet, because I cannot stick it until my board is completely dry, so make sure you're not putting it on there. But I'm gonna peel it off just to get this done, and also so that I can have that white backing. I'm gonna use that as my tray to put my glitter on, so I don't make a big mess, okay? So what you're gonna do is just scrape this pretty good. So on your stencil, we've already pulled out all your letters, and we've also already put the clear transfer tape on it. So the clear transfer tape is to pick up this vinyl and to put it onto your sign, okay? So let me scrape that. Once I've scraped that, my goal is to get the clear and the black to come off together into one piece. So I like to start in a corner, and I just start working my way diagonal like this and pulling. So if you're very lucky, then all of it will just simply come off in one little pull, okay? If it doesn't come off or you're having a hard time, you can try re-scraping it, or you can hold the front and the back together and kind of pinch them on those corners that are not peeling, and then just try to keep going with those letters. We want to just make sure that all of that black comes off onto the clear paper, okay? Now I'm going to set this aside, so I'm going to set it down upside down, of course, so I don't stick it to anything. So I'm just going to set it there for a minute while my board is still drying, and I'm going to get my white and my sponge. Now I want to just have a little bit of paint on my sponge, so I'm going to dip it in the sponge and I'm going to wipe it off on the side of the container. I want to be able to see that sponge texture on the end of my, the sponge texture through the paint and not just a big old blob of paint, okay? So again, you just dip it and then you wipe it off, all right? Now I'm going to put my snowflake on here, and I want that black dot on the top, okay? And then I'm just going to dab all on the front side of my snowflake with that white paint, okay? It's okay if it has a little bit of texture. We want it to get a good deal. I'm actually going to dip a tiny bit more of paint. So I dipped and then I wiped off, but it's okay for it to have some thick paint texture on here because we want it, of course, to allow the glitter to stick to it, okay? So I just dabbed all over the front. I can definitely tell that it's wet with paint. So let me just set this down on my lid, and then I'll get my container of glitter, and I'm just gonna just shake and sprinkle some of that glitter on the front. Okay, I want all the glitter that'll stick. So I'm gonna put that on there, and then I can just pick up my snowflake and kind of dab it on its side, kind of knock it like that. Okay, so look, we've got an awesome glittery snowflake. I'm going to go ahead and set that aside so that it can dry. Now you can throw this away. We don't have to save this glitter for anything else, but if you want to save it, then you can just fold your paper in half and you'll just dump it right back into, oh, maybe a little bit came out. Hold on, there we go. I think it's having a little bit of static in there, so it wants to stay. There we go. So you can fold it and put some back in there, okay? So I'm sure your kids would love to spread that glitter all over your house, so you can do that if you want to. All right, so let me set that aside. So we're done with that for now. So all that we have now is to put our stencil on this. I have to, again, just make sure that I'm totally dry. You might have to take a break and wait a few minutes, so now would be a great time to go get a drink or go to the bathroom or just chit chat. But you want to make sure this part is really dry before you put the stencil on, okay? So if you are totally dry and ready to go, then it's time to apply the stencil. If not, like I said, just wait, because it's better for you just to wait like 10 more minutes than to try to get the stencil on here, because number one, you could ruin the stencil, because if it gets wet paint on it, it's definitely not going to stick. Or number two, it's just going to be super hard to apply, and I don't want you to have to spend all of that time trying to get it to stick, okay? But once you're dry, you could go ahead and put this on here. This black rectangle that's around the words is a perfect outline of the lettering, like it's centered vertically and horizontally. So you can use those black lines on the outside to really center where your stencil is going to be, okay? So I want to look and make sure that it's parallel up on the top with the top piece of wood with that black, on the bottom, and on the sides, okay? You'll have a little bit of wiggle room, so you should be able to move it around just a little bit. Until you start scraping it, you should be able to move it, okay? So once I have it where I want it, I'm going to start by just kind of pushing it down with my hands. And once my hands are all pushed down, or once it pushed down my hands, excuse me, then I'm going to just start scraping it again with my scraper. Okay, so I'm trying to get this black to stick on here, okay? So my goal is now going to be to peel off that clear. So now that I've got the black on there, I'm going to start peeling off the clear. So I always like to work diagonally. I'm going to start at that top corner and I'm going to work my way down. Okay? So just slowly, you want to make sure all that black stays behind. So like I had a little bit of my snowflake that was kind of peeling up. So I just went real slowly off of that, over that snowflake, and then I just kind of held my hand on there. I got to get the dot that's inside of the E. Want to make sure that all of that sticks, okay? So if you have any little piece that's peeling up, I really put mine on here when mine was still a little bit wet, so I knew it was going to be a little bit harder for me, but it should not be very difficult for you because yours will be really, really dry, okay? So that's good. So far, I got let it. Let's get this last part. All right, so I'm just kind of leaving it, I'm kind of pulling with a constant pressure always in that diagonal direction, and then I'm using my other hand to check and make sure that everything is sticking, okay? The biggest mistake you could make was really just to keep pulling if it's not sticking, because then you're gonna stretch that vinyl, and we don't wanna stretch the vinyl, okay? So I'm done with that now. That is trash, so I can set that aside. So now we've got our wording on here. I'm gonna go back to the white. And again, every time I'm gonna go paint this, I'm gonna dip it and I'm gonna wipe it off, okay? So I got that sponge texture, and now I'm just gonna start dabbing all over this stencil, okay? It's very easy to wanna get just a ton of paint and put it on here. And really, if you do that, you're gonna end up with a lot of leakage and some sloppy looking letters, and I just don't think you're gonna like it as much if you just take your time and dab it, okay? Kind of the rule of thumb for this is, it's hard to tell in the video, but you'll kind of get what I'm saying whenever you're doing this, is that you want to be able to see the stencil through your paint, okay? So if you're doing this and there's so much paint you can't even see what the stencil says, then you have too much paint, okay? So you're going to want to like pick it up either with that dry side of your sponge, like flip your sponge over and start dabbing it with that dry side to kind of dry up some of that paint. Or if you use just a ton of paint, on this side, then just dip your sponge in it and try to use it whenever you move over here to this side, okay? The other thing that I know is tempting to do, just because it's faster, is to just wipe like this on the board. Please don't do that. You know, if you do that, you're really just risking the look of what your sign is gonna turn out like. And so I don't want you to do that, because I would hate for you to mess up and not like the way that it looks, okay? So again, I would just really try to be patient. This really only takes maybe 5 minutes to get done. And you're not gonna regret it if you do it this way, okay? I feel like if you just pull the paint across, you might regret how it looks. So just dab it nice and easy all over. Again, just paying attention. Can I see the stencil through here, okay? As long as you can see the stencil, you should be just fine with how much paint you're using, okay? So I'm just going back, and one of the things that's a little bit tricky is just making sure that you got all the little tails and all the little things like where like all the little snowflakes and all the letters and everything. So I'm just kind of going back and checking every letter one at a time and making sure I actually painted each little tail of every T and dotted the I and all of that. That way when I rip up the stencil, I don't have any surprises to see that I missed anything, okay? All right, so I'm all done with that. So I'm gonna set that aside, pop my lid back on my white so I don't spill it everywhere, okay? And set that to the side. Now, you could just wait for this part to dry, and then when it's dry, you can peel up. I'm gonna go ahead and start peeling just for the sake of time. So when you peel, so just like we applied it diagonally, I'm also gonna peel diagonally from the other end. It doesn't really matter where you start, but when you start peeling, you kind of just peel up and you just wiggle, wiggle, wiggle that vinyl. It's helpful if you have someone else and they wanna hold down the board for you without touching the paint, especially if you're wet. If you're not wet, then you're fine to just peel up. But see, I just kind of pull, pull, pull up the whole time, and I'm not letting it fall back down. Because if it falls back down, then it's more likely to put white paint where I don't want it, okay? So I still have a couple little pieces that are on the inside of my letters, like the inside of the E and the O and the W. I'm actually gonna just use one of my nails. If it was dry, it would be pretty easy to just use your fingernail to pop those out, but since I'm still wet, I'm gonna use a nail. You should have had a few extras of these, and I'm just gonna pop out those little pieces. Pretty easy because they fell right where the split on the wood was, so I didn't even really have to try that part except for the inside of the E, but that was easy breezy. So pop that out. Here we go. So here's our lettering so far. Ta-da! All right, so now just a couple more steps. I have my handy dandy glue gun right here. You just need a little bit of glue to put your snowflake into place. I'm actually going to apply on the snowflake and not on the board, because that way I don't end up with any accidental like hot glue that's showing that I don't want it to show. So you really shouldn't need a whole lot. I'm just going to put little tiny bits of hot glue on the back of this, just enough so that I can stick it down. I'm kind of doing little dots on the ends of the snowflake. Just make sure that it doesn't start drying on you before you get it stuck down. So just a few little dots on here, and then I'm going to see how I want this to look. There we go. Place that down. I'm just going to dab it just a tiny bit with my fingers, but I don't want to push it too hard, because I think my glitter might not be all the way dry yet. It's pretty much dry, but not all the way. So I just want to be very gentle with that. All right, and then we have this long piece. This is actually 2 pieces of twine you should have. So if you just want to get one. So what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this around the end. So I'm going to pull the sign towards me and just kind of let the end of the sign hang off. And then I'm going to use my left hand's just going to stay still. So I want to pull it enough where there's kind of a leftover around the back, because then when I'm all done wrapping, I can tie it in the back, okay? But the front is what I care about it looking like, right? So again, I have this kind of like little tail over here that's going to wrap around the back, and then I want to just wrap, and I'm going to wrap 3 times. So that's once, twice, oh, hold on. Actually, I am going to wrap twice. Let's see. Here we go. Just hanging off a little bit. Here we go. So I actually did twice all the way, and then my 3rd time I just went over 2 boards and kind of made a little star over there. Actually, I might only do 1. Sorry, it's a little bit shorter than I was thinking it was. So hold on, let me try this one more time. It's okay, you can just move it around until you like the way that it looks. I just want to get where I can tie it in the back, okay? There we go. Kind of made a little X pattern, okay? And then I'm going to tie it nice and tight in the back. The other thing you could do if you wanted to is you could tie it in the front if you want that look. Again, you can just kind of play with it and see what you like. Okay, so I tied that. I actually ended up doing twice. Okay, so I went around it twice, and then I'm going to tie it in the back. Okay, so just adjust those to where you like that, and we'll do that again on this side. Grab my string. Let's see how many times I can make it around with this one. Okay, so I did the 2 times, and I kind of crisscross my string up in this like top board over here. On this side, I'm going to adjust it where the crisscross is more on the bottom part of the board. So I kind of like to do it opposite, just so they look a little bit different on each end. Okay, so let me tie that again. I'm just tying it in just a regular knot in the back, just pulling it as tight as I can, and then I'm tying that knot, and then all I'm doing is just trimming the back of that. There we go. So there we go. You can see that I have it all done. So I glued on that glitter. If you want to distress that a little bit more, then you're more than welcome to. So you'll just use your sandpaper, and you can go along the edges and distress it like that. Just don't do that until it's really dry. And yeah, you're good to go. So I hope you had a great time, and I hope your sign turned out fantastic. Thank you for joining us this month, and I hope to see you next month for another party. Thank you. Have a great night.